Tonight, inflation falls to a 3.5-year low, but it could still be a while before interest rates are cut. Hello, I'm Jeremy Fernandez. This is ABC News. New data shows Sydney-siders are increasingly choosing to stay in instead of going out, and the nighttime economy is struggling as a result. Kamala Harris delivers her closing argument in Washington, urging voters not to give Donald Trump a second chance. After 5 challenging years, one small town celebrates a standout harvest season. And music, murder and magic. Sydney Festival's 2025 lineup promises to have it all. Inflation has fallen to a 3.5-year low, but economists say it's still not coming down fast enough for the Reserve Bank to cut interest rates before Christmas. They now expect the first cut to come early next year.
Inflation rocketed after the first year of COVID and has been smashing the economy since.
It's just a balancing act. Honestly, it's really a hard balancing act.
Costs have been increasing, but businesses, in many cases, can't pass them on.
If you add up the margins, it's what you're going to do. You need to charge $35 for a Palmer, but we don't, because no one's going to pay that.
In the 3 months to September, annual inflation fell to 2.8% and was 0.2% for the quarter, driven by price rises in food and overseas travel, particularly to Europe, and breaks at home during school holidays. Other price rises were largely offset by falls in electricity as households received energy rebates and fuel from lower oil prices. The Reserve Bank's preferred measure of inflation, which excludes volatile items, fell to 3.5% annually, down from 4% the previous quarter.
These new numbers show that inflation is at its lowest in almost 4 years. Our energy rebates are helping, and we're pleased with that, but underlying inflation's come off substantially as well.
Temporary subsidies will not hoodwink the Reserve Bank of Australia, and they certainly won't hoodwink the Australian public.
People are struggling to pay more and deal with interest rates that have been lifted to try to tame inflation.
Past 18 months, interest rates on my mortgage have gone up. I've had to refinance my house. Cost of everyday items has gone through the roof.
Inflation is falling, but not fast enough to convince the Reserve Bank to cut interest rates.
We think that the RBA will need to see that underlying inflation measure come down a bit lower before they'll be convinced that inflation will not only return to their 2 to 3% target band, but actually stay there as well.
Of the big 4 banks, only the Commonwealth Bank thought that there was a chance that interest rates would be cut this year. After today's data, it's moved that tip back to at least February. Daniel Ziffer, ABC News.
While workers are being ordered back to the office, helping fill CBDs, the state's nighttime economy is still struggling. The government's mining Opal and banking data to assess our movements after dark. And rather than a big night out, it seems more and more people are opting for a takeaway meal and a night in.
From the bright lights of New York to the buzzing streets of Tokyo, some cities seem to get even better after dark. While Sydney may not have the same fame, the International Nightlife Association says the harbour city still has lots to celebrate.
My experience of those places, without a doubt, Sydney is ranked up there with them, if not above them in many respects.
But new data shows the state's nighttime economy is under pressure. Adjusted for inflation, nighttime spending was down 11% in the June quarter and down 6% compared with the year before. Workers have been ordered back to the office, and Opal data suggests they're heeding the call, with the monthly number of CBD trips back at pre-pandemic levels. But it seems they're less likely to splash cash on late-night shopping or after-work drinks.
Given the pressure from interest rates on the Sydney mortgage market, that is the reality.
Across the state, the number of gambling venues fell in the last year, and there was a minor drop-off in the number of pubs and bars too. There was modest growth in performing arts spaces and a clear increase in sport and recreation facilities. But the biggest growth of all was enjoyed by takeaway shops.
one of the challenges, if I'm being honest, because it suggests that people are maybe sitting at home. My job's to get people out off the couch having fun in the city.
The government plans to keep releasing this data, but that means it'll be judged on the effectiveness of its new vibrancy reforms. They're designed to boost outdoor drinking and dining, encourage live music and discourage noise complaints. The government hoping the new laws will be just the shake-up this industry needs. Nick Dole, ABC News, Sydney.
Abortion is legal across the country, but doctors fear an unspoken ban is robbing rural and regional women of the right to choose. An ABC investigation has revealed patients are being denied equitable access due to a range of reasons, including ideological positions, unclear guidelines and a lack of government funding.
Reflective but still reeling. Melissa's carefully planned surgical abortion was upended by a phone call just hours before she was due to be admitted to hospital.
He just basically said, "I'm really sorry, we can't do the procedure today." I was broke down. I was like, "What do you mean? You can't? What is that? Where does that leave me?"
On the phone was her obstetrician.
I could tell he was baffled by the whole situation and he didn't understand why it hadn't happened.
Melissa's surgical termination was meant to be performed here at Queanbeyan District Hospital in southern New South Wales. Her baby had severe life-limiting malformations. This hospital had performed the same procedure under similar circumstances before. But the ABC can reveal that since Melissa's experience, the hospital suddenly stopped providing surgical terminations for fetal anomalies and medical reasons. Melissa's GP says there's been no explanation of the late cancellation, despite repeated requests to the local health district. She fears an ideological opposition to abortion could ultimately be behind it.
It feels like you're shadowboxing, that there's a pushback and you're not really sure why, and that's very frustrating.
The local health district says it supports women to access abortion services, including medical termination of pregnancy. Doctors are calling it an unspoken ban. In Orange, the local members also seeking answers after the hospital there stopped providing abortions for non-medical reasons.
This is something that's permitted under law. It's a public health institution.
The local health district that oversees Orange has confirmed it is sending women seeking abortions for non-medical reasons to private providers or family planning.
The power lies with the Minister and with the Health Department. And it's really important that they ensure that this essential healthcare is delivered.
Melissa eventually had a medical abortion at her local hospital. Ultimately, though, she was denied the right to choose. Lucy Barber, ABC News, Queanbeyan.
The US President Joe Biden has appeared to call Donald Trump supporters garbage after a weekend Republican rally that was overshadowed by crude comments. It came as Donald Trump courted the Hispanic vote in one of the swing states, Pennsylvania, trying to brush off controversy sparked by a comedian's racist joke at the rally. In Washington, meanwhile, Kamala Harris has urged her supporters to reject the former president's efforts to sow division and fear.
In the heart of the Capitol, a speech heavy with symbolism.
We know who Donald Trump is. He is the person who stood at this very spot nearly 4 years ago and sent an armed mob to the United States Capitol to overturn the will of the people in a free and fair election.
Vice President Kamala Harris told the crowd her Republican opponent, Donald Trump, should not be given a second chance.
This is someone who is unstable, obsessed with revenge, consumed with grievance, and out for unchecked power.
What's your assessment of the race?
She's going to kick his butt, yeah.
There's a chance at history to be made, and to be able to be at this speech seems pretty special.
Donald Trump was in the Latino majority city of Allentown in battleground state Pennsylvania, still dealing with the fallout from derogatory comments made at his New York rally.
A floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah, I think it's called Puerto Rico.
Joe Biden has now weighed in.
The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters.
The president later claimed it was the hateful rhetoric that was garbage. But the Trump campaign has seized on the comments.
And I hope their campaign is about to apologize for what Joe Biden just said. We are not garbage. We are patriots who love America.
Up with the people, down with them.
In Allentown, opinions were divided.
Even my family that lives on the island right now, they all support Trump.
These recent comments is just a long history of hate. This rally is a rally of hate. That's how we see it.
Urged by some allies to apologise, Donald Trump instead leaned in.
There's never been an event so beautiful. It was like a love fest, an absolute love fest, and it was my honour to be involved.
In its early days, the Harris-Walz campaign was running on a message of joy and the other side being weird. In its final days, it's increasingly adopting the central message that Joe Biden was campaigning on, that Donald Trump represents a threat to the very fabric of this nation.
In a week's time, the country will deliver its verdict. Barbara Miller, ABC News, Washington.
At least 90 people, including many children, are dead or missing after an Israeli airstrike in northern Gaza. The US has called the attack in the town of Beit Lahia horrifying. It's also expressed deep concern at Israel's move to ban the regional UN aid agency, saying there's no alternative to UNRWA when it comes to delivering life-saving aid to Gaza. A warning, this story does contain some distressing images.
Bodies line the streets of Beit Lahia as desperate Gazans dig through the rubble with their bare hands, searching for survivors. An Israeli airstrike on a residential building, killing and wounding dozens, including children.
This was a horrifying incident with a horrifying result.
The ongoing strikes underpinning grave concerns about Israel's move to ban the UN relief agency UNRWA in the occupied Palestinian territories.
This will cause great starvation for people. In this way, they're sentencing people to death.
With the backbone of the aid operation there, if you take the backbone out of a body, the body falls apart.
UNRWA's compound in East Jerusalem is already half empty, and Israel's been claiming for months Hamas has infiltrated the agency's staff inside Gaza, after it was found 9 workers out of 30,000 across the region may have been involved in Hamas's October 7 attacks.
In no one's wildest fantasies can that be characterised as the entire organisation being infected, infiltrated.
Come to the Knesset, and I'm going to personally show the evidence.
One of the sponsors of the proposal claiming a replacement aid agency will be found.
I think it's going to get even better of everything that UNRWA did.
Nearly 2 million people are displaced within Gaza, and most rely on UNRWA for their survival. It's feared its removal in 3 months' time will have dire consequences for those who remain. There are growing calls for Israel to reconsider, but little willingness from the government, it seems, to listen.
Right now, there is no alternative to UNRWA when it comes to delivering food and other life-saving aid in Gaza.
In southern Lebanon, more than 60 people have been killed in the latest strikes across the Bekaa Valley, while in Sidon, at least 3 apartment buildings have been struck as Israel ramps up its attacks on claimed Hezbollah targets.
This area doesn't have officials or people belonging to different political parties or anything.
Civilians once again bearing the brunt of Israel's relentless campaign. Matthew Doran, ABC News, Jerusalem.
While many farmers continue to do it tough, a small town in the New South Wales-Queensland border is booming thanks to a spectacular harvest. With near record crops coming off, Mungandai is celebrating the good times.
As the sun rises, harvesters are already hard at work. They're going day and night to get as much of the winter grain off as possible. Consistent rainfall has led to a standout season.
It's a fantastic year and the yields are really good, and harvest has been relatively smooth so far.
A successful harvest isn't just good for growers, it also helps the local community. Mungandai had just over 600 residents at the last census, but that number explodes with out-of-town labour this time of year.
Looking at our keg
usage back in drought, we'd do 6 kegs, maybe 6 a week, whereas now we're doing upwards of 35.
From the cafes to the servos and local agronomy businesses, everyone is busy during harvest time.
You know, there are people about, there's money to be spent, the community is really benefiting from the good season that we've had.
Not everywhere has been as lucky as these farms. Frost is expected to knock out more than 1 million tonnes of grain across southern New South Wales, South Australia and Victoria. That means that here in northern New South Wales, they're doing the heavy lifting, with growers working long hours to get grain in the silos.
The chickpea yields are fantastic, up near the record yields we've had, and the wheat's up near the record yields we've had on this farm.
In the past 5 years, Mungindi has seen drought, COVID-19 border restrictions and its only supermarket burnt down. But 2024 is looking like a year to remember, for the better.
To see everyone have a crop, like the town's alive.
With summer on the way, everyone's hoping the good luck continues for the next lot of crops. Lara Webster, ABC News, Mungindi.
Coming up on 7:30, the community left without reliable power for almost 2 weeks.
If we had a pretty emotive picture of a flood or a fire, people would care more. Meanwhile, we're hemorrhaging internally.
That's put our livelihoods at risk.
Maintenance was not neglected at a cost-cutting measure.
There are many questions that we want to get to the bottom of to understand more clearly the facts that led to the power outage.
A devastated community in Melbourne is rallying around the family of an 11-year-old boy who was killed yesterday when a car careened into students at a school. Jack Davey is being remembered as a sweet boy and a gifted athlete who had a bright future. 4 other children were injured in the horrific crash. Danny Tran has this report.
Surrounded by a rising tide of tributes, a grieving family is overcome, struggling to grasp the loss of their son and brother, Jack Davey. This is how they want him remembered, full of joy, ready for another day of school with his mates. But yesterday, that was all cut short.
Our thoughts and heartfelt sympathy are with Jack's family and friends, and our thoughts are also with the 4 students who remain in hospital.
Such a sweet boy, really kind, never heard a bad thing about him.
Just an hour before the bell was to ring, a car performing a U-turn outside Auburn South Primary in Melbourne's eastern suburbs ploughed through the school's fence, fatally striking Jack and seriously injuring 4 of his classmates. This morning, family members, friends and the school community gathered at the scene, leaving tributes and holding their loved ones closer, all trying to make sense of the tragedy.
It's the worst nightmare for parents and families and siblings in a school community that you could possibly imagine.
Jack Davey is being remembered as a natural athlete whose talent shone brightly. In July, he was a member of the Australian Under-12s futsal team, which clinched victory in Fiji. The sport's peak body today paid tribute to a sweet boy, always in their hearts. The 11-year-old was also a gifted Aussie rules footballer, known for being calm under pressure and a tough all-rounder with a bright future. His local club, the Glen Iris Gladiators, devastated by his loss. But for Jack Davey's schoolmates, there are some questions their parents just can't answer.
They're asking me where is boy gone, when he will be back, where is that 4 kids, when they will be back. What I can say, you know.
The driver, a 40-year-old woman from Hawthorn East, was arrested and interviewed, but has since been released. The surviving children remain in hospital in a stable condition as the local community rallies around.
This school community is so wonderful and strong, and together we will get through this.
I've got little kids. I can only imagine what it was like to drop Jack off to school and not pick him up.
A thought that many will struggle with. Danny Tran, ABC News, Melbourne.
Anthony Albanese has emphatically denied ever calling the former Qantas boss Alan Joyce about a flight upgrade in a statement just released by his office. The Prime Minister has faced days of questioning after 9 newspapers reported he'd had conversations with the former airline CEO about upgrades. While Mr Albanese has accepted offers of better seats, including while he was the Transport Minister, he says all have been appropriately declared. The nation's Anti-Corruption Commission is tonight under scrutiny with a new report finding the Commissioner didn't properly deal with a declared conflict of interest. It follows a decision by the NACC not to investigate individuals referred by the Robodebt Royal Commission, a move that now has to be reconsidered.
He's at the helm of the nation's corruption watchdog, but now the questions have turned on him.
I think Paul Brereton's position as Commissioner is in question, as the finding is that he committed officer misconduct as the Commissioner.
At issue, a perceived conflict of interest. Commissioner Paul Brereton was a close associate of one of the people referred to him by the Robodebt Royal Commission, and he didn't fully remove himself from the decision not to initiate an investigation, according to the inspector charged with keeping the NAC in check.
Commissioner Brereton should ask himself whether him remaining in that position is good for the National Anti-Corruption Commission.
The decision drew more than 1,200 complaints, with some considering the NAC had breached the public trust. While the Commissioner had declared his relationship and delegated the decision, the inspector still found his involvement in the decision-making was comprehensive. At the meeting where the decision was made, the inspector said the NAC Commissioner contributed to the discussion, settled the minutes and was involved in formulating the reasons for the decision.
The National Anti-Corruption Commission really has to heed the lessons of this episode.
The NAC has labelled this a mistake, a misapprehension by the Commissioner, and for this much anticipated body established to clean up politics, it's a bumpy start in its first high-profile case. Still, there's confidence from the major parties.
I think the public has total trust in the Commissioner and in the Commission.
The system has actually worked in that the Inspector General has said, hey, you need to go back and redo this decision.
A decision many will be waiting on. Evelyn Manfield, ABC News, Canberra.
New South Wales Police have made a major breakthrough in the case of the stolen Bluey coins. Strikeforce Bandit has sniffed out more than 40,000 of the limited edition coins at a storage facility in Western Sydney. The unreleased dollar bucks were first reported stolen from a warehouse in July. So far, 3 people have been arrested over the alleged theft. Detectives are still on the hunt for the remaining 20,000 still missing. To finance now, the Aussie dollar fell today after the September quarter inflation data came out, and the local share market also fell, wiping out 3 days of gains. Here's Alan Kohler.
It took a while for currency traders to figure out what the inflation figures meant. At first, the Aussie went up because the newsflash said hopes of an early rate cut were dashed. But then it tipped over as everyone thought, oh, hang on, maybe it's better than we thought. And is now trading at 65.4 US cents, down from last night's 65.7. But I think the truth is today's figures change nothing. Sure, headline inflation is 2.8%, well within the target band of 2 to 3%. But we should ignore that because the Reserve Bank does. It looks at the trimmed mean, which cuts off the biggest 15% of price rises and the smallest 15%, and only includes the middle 70%. And that's even more relevant this quarter because of electricity rebates, which have temporarily cut the power prices to 30% below what they would have been. But core inflation is doing better than the Reserve Bank wants it to, which is to come down to 2.6% by the end of 2026. If it keeps doing better, then rate cuts are on. And if you've got young kids and you're thinking that inflation hasn't come down at all, actually, that might have something to do with this. Childcare inflation has soared to well above 10%. The main event on the share market today was also about the cost of living. Woolworths put out a trading update that said customers are under pressure and the earnings outlook is challenged. The share price dropped 6% and other retailers and banks also had a bad day. Globally, it was the US and Japan up, Hong Kong and Shanghai down, and not much happened on commodity markets apart from silver going up more than 2%. And that's finance.
A top contender for the Melbourne Cup, Via Sistina, has been ruled out following her remarkable Cox Plate win. The 7-year-old became the world's top-ranked horse on the back of the victory, but in a statement, her owner says the decision was made not to race her in the Cup, opting instead for the shorter distance Championship Stakes on Saturday week. It leaves jockey James McDonald without a ride for Tuesday's Melbourne Cup. From operatic magic to a Wild West takeover of Town Hall, the next Sydney Festival will feature 22 world premieres when it takes over the Harbour City come January.
Music, murder and magic. Next year's festival's promising to have it all. The true story of legendary Las Vegas magicians Siegfried and Roy has sparked an opera which required its stars to quite literally learn a few new tricks.
For opera singers, very, very, very different set of skills required for this one. We're learning incredible magic tricks. As you can see, probably a little bit more glamorous and glitzy than I've ever really been on stage.
It's one of more than 130 shows and events during the January festival.
So the experience with Sydney Festival is always like bringing that energy and it's always been fun.
With everything from live music in Wendy Whiteley's garden to outdoor family concerts and public yoga classes. Plenty of the city's landmark buildings will become a stage, with Town Hall transformed into a Wild West pioneer town for dark noon, fresh from rave reviews in New York and Edinburgh. Meanwhile, audiences will be invited inside this Darlinghurst courthouse to see one of the many notorious trials that have played out in its docks brought back to life in the true crime story A Model Murder. The play tells the tale of model Shirley Beager, who shot her cheating lover dead outside a King's Cross nightclub in the 1950s, and her sensational murder trial.
So if I think about some of
It's the fourth and final program from festival director Olivia Ansell, who had this advice for her successor.
I think if you can paint a love letter to this city and represent the many, many stories, the incredible artists that call this city home, and make people see art in different ways.
And another chance for Sydney to show off a different side. Sarah Gerrithy, ABC News, Sydney.
Let's take a look at the weather now. And Tom, there are new research findings about how climate change is altering our weather maps.
Yes, Jeremy, global warming, it's not just raising our temperatures, but it's also shifting the look of the daily weather charts. High pressure is becoming more dominant while the number of low pressure systems is declining. And since lows are one of the Earth's primary rainmakers, this is having an impact on Australia's precipitation. Now, a new report has found around a 30% decrease in lows forming across parts of southern Australia since the middle of last century. Now, lows bring around half of southern Australia's total rainfall, and as a result, the research found a reduction in critical cool season rain of up to 15%, which is impacting both agriculture and water security. Of particular interest for New South Wales is East Coast lows. A separate 2022 study found they could decrease by up to 40% by the end of this century under a high emissions scenario. Last night was warm for Sydney thanks to a blanket of low cloud. Lows of 17 were 4 above average for the city and 6 above average for Richmond. A sunny day followed with warm northerly winds. We climbed up to 32 degrees in Penrith, while winds turned easterly near the coast in the afternoon. That helped Bellambi to 23 and the city reached 25, 3 above the average. Last night's minimums were mild for most areas, although Cooma dipped to a frosty 0 degrees. They quickly recovered, though. A high of 27 in Cooma was 9 above the average. Actually, the whole state was warmer than normal, apart from the north coast. On the satellite, well, our skies are clear right across eastern Australia, although if you look closely, you can just make out a couple of storms along the New South Wales northern ranges. On the chart tomorrow, a weak area of low pressure will move up the coast, and that will trigger some showers and thunderstorms. Around the country then, a shower or two from Melbourne and Hobart tomorrow, warm with a possible storm in Brisbane. For the northeast, warm and mostly dry, just a slight chance of showers and storms, although increasing to a medium chance across the Hunter from about the middle of the afternoon onwards behind a weak southerly change. For the southeast, there's a medium chance of showers and thunderstorms on the ranges tomorrow and a high chance along most of the coastline apart from the far south. Cooler southerly winds, so temperatures dropping slightly compared to today. To the west then, A slight chance of showers for the central and southern regions with a possible storm on the southern half of the slopes and plains. A touch cooler for the south, but expect hot maximums across the north, climbing up to the mid-30s. On the waters, 20 to 25 knot winds for most of the coast, 30 knots in the far north, and seas will average around 2 metres. Now for Sydney, down to 15 in the city overnight and 11 to 14 across the west. A mostly sunny morning, then a southeasterly change around lunchtime with a high chance of showers and thunderstorms to follow in the afternoon and evening. Heading for 25 in the city, 28 in Parramatta and back up to 31 in the outer west. The sun will rise at 5:55 and ahead. Cooler Friday with a shower or two, 23 to 25. Possible shower Saturday, 22, but that's ahead of hot northerlies on Sunday, 30 in the city and up to 35 degrees across the west, Jeremy.
Tom, thank you. Here's Sarah Ferguson for you now with 7:30.